Ants. The rain was coming down in slow, heavy sheets when Ethan Cole's car turned into the long driveway of his estate. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. He was meant to be in Chicago for another 2 days, closing a deal that would add another billion to the empire he had built from nothing. But something in his chest had tightened all morning, an unease he couldn't explain, a feeling that refused to leave him alone. So he left early. And now, as the iron gates closed behind him with a deep mechanical groan, Ethan noticed something strange. The house felt different, not broken, not visibly wrong, just quiet in a way it was never supposed to be. Inside the mansion, Grace was standing in the kitchen with trembling hands. She had lived in this house longer than anyone else, longer than the marble floors had been polished, longer than the staff had been replaced, longer than Veronica had become Mrs. Cole. To Ethan, she was mom. Not adoptive, not legal, not conditional, just mom. The woman who had taken in a forgotten boy from a broken foster system, raised him on borrowed patience and late-night prayers, and somehow turned him into the man the world now feared in boardrooms. But today, Grace wasn't humming like she usually did. Today, she was quiet, too quiet. Her fingers hovered over the counter as she wiped it for the 3rd time, even though it was already spotless. Ants. Her eyes kept drifting toward the hallway that led to the main living room. That was where Veronica had been for the last hour. Veronica Cole, elegant, controlled, perfect in public, and something else in private that Grace had never fully learned how to name. A voice echoed faintly from the living room. "You still don't understand your place in this house, do you?" Grace froze. Veronica's tone was soft, almost sweet, but there was a sharpness underneath it like glass hidden inside silk. Grace slowly wiped her hands on her apron. "I've been here longer than you've." A laugh cut her off. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, amused sound that somehow felt worse. "Longer than me?" Veronica stepped into the doorway, holding a glass of wine. Her heels clicked softly against the floor. "Grace, you've been here as a guest. Let's not confuse history with ownership." Grace's jaw tightened. "I raised him," she said carefully, "when nobody else would." Veronica tilted her head slightly, studying her like she was something misplaced in an expensive room. "Yes," she replied, "and now he's successful, which means he no longer needs reminders of where he came from." The words hung in the air longer than they should have. Grace felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You think he's ashamed of me?" she asked quietly. Veronica took a slow sip of wine. "Ants, I think people like you don't understand how the world works when money enters the picture." There it was again, that subtle edge, that careful distance. Grace straightened slightly. "Ethan would never." "Oh, please," Veronica interrupted, walking closer now. "Ethan trusts me. He trusts my judgment. And my judgment says that certain influences don't belong in this house anymore." Grace's hands curled slightly at her sides. "This house isn't yours to decide that in." A pause. Veronica smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No," she said softly. "Not yet." In the kitchen, the air felt tighter now, like the walls had shifted closer together. Grace took a slow breath. "If this is about respect, it's about control," Veronica corrected gently. And then, like she was discussing something as simple as changing curtains, she added, "You're going to move out." The words didn't land immediately. Grace blinked once, then again. "Move out?" Veronica nodded. "I've arranged a small place for you, comfortable, quiet. You'll like it." Grace let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You can't be serious." Veronica's gaze didn't waver. "I don't need your permission, Grace." A silence followed, heavy, thick, the kind that presses against the skin. Ants. Grace looked toward the hallway again, almost instinctively, like she expected Ethan to appear any second and break this strange moment in half. But he wasn't there, and Veronica noticed that glance. "Oh," she said softly. "You're waiting for him." Grace didn't answer. Veronica stepped closer again, lowering her voice. "That's the funny thing about people like you," she continued. "You think loyalty guarantees protection?" Grace's voice sharpened. "Don't talk about people like me." A flicker. Just a flicker. Something colder crossed Veronica's face before she smoothed it away. "I'm talking about reality," she said calmly. "Ethan is a businessman, not a child clinging to childhood memories." Grace felt her heart thump harder now. "You don't know him like I do." Veronica's smile returned. Soft, precise. dangerously controlled. No, she agreed. I know him better. A sound echoed faintly from upstairs. A door closing. Grace startled slightly. Veronica didn't move. Instead, she said something quieter. You should pack your things tonight. Grace shook her head slowly. No, the refusal was simple, but it shifted something in the room. Veronica placed her glass down on the counter with careful precision. I was hoping you'd make this easy, she said. Grace's eyes narrowed. Easy? And that was when Veronica turned her head slightly toward the hallway. Ants. Marcus, she called. From the shadows near the living room entrance, a staff member stepped forward. Grace hadn't even noticed him there. He looked uncomfortable. Avoiding eye contact, Veronica didn't look at him either. Take her upstairs, she said. Grace's voice rose slightly. Excuse me? Marcus hesitated. Just for a second. Then he stepped forward. I'm sorry, Miss Grace, he muttered quietly. It's just orders. Grace took a step back. Orders from who? But before anyone could answer, a sound came from outside. A car door, followed by footsteps on wet stone. Slow, heavy, familiar. Veronica paused, just slightly. Marcus froze, and Grace turned her head toward the front of the house, her breath catching in her throat, because she knew that rhythm. Even before she saw him, even before the door opened, Ethan Cole was home early. And as his hand reached for the handle, he stopped for a fraction of a second, noticing something no one inside had realized yet. The house was too quiet, not peaceful, not normal, wrong. And just as he pushed the door open, a voice from inside said, low and controlled, Take her upstairs. Ethan stepped in, and everything inside that house was about to change. Ethan stepped inside, and the first thing he noticed wasn't the people. It was the silence that didn't belong to his home. The kind of silence that feels staged, forced, ants. Like everyone inside had been holding their breath for too long and forgot how to exhale. His wet shoes hit the marble floor once. Then again. Slow. Controlled. Take her upstairs. The words were still hanging in the air when Ethan's eyes adjusted to the light, and what he saw made him stop completely. Grace was standing near the kitchen entrance, her hands slightly raised, not in surrender exactly, but in that strange frozen position people take when they don't understand why they're being treated like a threat. Marcus was a few feet away from her, uncomfortable, hesitating, and Veronica was calm, too calm, standing like she owned the space between every heartbeat in the room. For a second, no one spoke. Even the house seemed to wait. Then Grace turned. And when she saw Ethan, something inside her broke open. Ethan, she said softly, like she wasn't sure he was real. That one word shifted everything. Marcus immediately stepped back. Veronica's expression changed, but only slightly. A soft adjustment, a correction of posture. Like someone rearranging a mask. Ethan didn't move forward yet. His voice came low. What is going on here? Nobody answered immediately. That silence again. The same wrong silence. Grace opened her mouth, but Veronica spoke first. Warm voice. Controlled tone. Perfect timing. You're home early. Ethan's eyes didn't leave her. Ants. I didn't ask that. A pause. Veronica gave a small smile. It's nothing serious. Just a misunderstanding. Grace let out a quiet, shaky breath. Misunderstanding? She repeated, almost in disbelief. Ethan finally looked at her. And in that second, everything in his face changed, because he saw it. The tension in her hands, the tightness in her shoulders, the way she stood slightly behind herself, like she was trying to take up less space in her own home. And that was impossible. Grace Cole did not shrink, not in his house, not ever. His voice dropped. Mom, what happened? That word Mom hit the room like a reset button. Grace's eyes softened immediately, like she had been waiting for that exact word to pull her back from wherever she had been pushed. But Veronica moved first. Ethan, she said gently, stepping closer. We were discussing living arrangements. Ethan turned slightly. Living arrangements? Veronica nodded. Grace's voice came sharper now. She told me to leave. Silence. Not confusion this time. Something heavier. Ethan blinked once, slowly, then looked at Veronica again. And there it was, a shift in him. The businessman wasn't gone, but something older had surfaced underneath it. The boy she had raised. The one who remembered hunger, cold nights, and a woman who gave him her last plate of food without asking anything in return. Ants. Is that true? He asked quietly. Veronica didn't flinch. Yes. The answer was immediate, clean, unapologetic. Grace's breath caught. Ethan didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked around the room, like he was trying to understand how a conversation like this was happening inside his home without his knowledge. Then his eyes came back to Veronica, on whose authority. A small smile. "This house runs better when things are organized," she said. "And I think we both know Grace has become emotionally dependent on a space she no longer needs to occupy." Grace's face tightened. "Emotionally dependent?" she repeated. Ethan's jaw clenched slightly, but he still hadn't raised his voice. That was what made it more dangerous. "Veronica," he said carefully. "She raised me." "I know," Veronica replied. No hesitation, no emotion, just acknowledgement. Then she added, "And I respect that. But gratitude doesn't mean permanence." Grace shook her head slightly, like she was trying to process the conversation. "I am not a guest in this house." Veronica turned toward her now. Slowly. "You are," she said softly. That single word changed the temperature of the room. Ethan took one step forward. Marcus stepped back immediately again. Grace looked at Ethan now, eyes searching. "Ethan, I didn't want to make trouble. She came in here and started saying, 'Ants.' I'm not making trouble," Veronica interrupted calmly. "I'm making decisions that protect your household structure." Ethan turned his head slightly. "Protect it from what?" Veronica didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Grace, then back at him. "From instability," she said. A pause. Ethan's voice lowered further. "My mother is not instability." Something flashed in Veronica's eyes. Just for a second. Then it disappeared again. "I'm talking about boundaries," she corrected, "and respect." Grace let out a bitter breath. "Respect," she whispered. "After everything I did for him?" Ethan turned fully toward Grace now. His voice softened instantly. "Mom, tell me everything." That was all he needed to say, and something inside Grace finally cracked open. Her voice trembled, but she forced it steady. "She told me to leave tonight," she said. "She said I've outlived my place here, that you don't need reminders of your past." The words hung there, heavy, unfiltered. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at Veronica. And slowly the silence changed again. This time it wasn't confusion. It was recognition. Like he was finally seeing something he had refused to see before. Veronica stepped closer to him now, lowering her voice. "This isn't what it sounds like," she said. "I'm trying to help you build something stable. Ants. Your image, your future people will question everything if Ethan cut her off. Did you order my mother to leave my house?" A direct question. No softness left now. Veronica held his gaze, and for the first time, there was the slightest hesitation. But only for a second. "Yes," she said again. Simple, final. Marcus looked down immediately, like he regretted even existing in the room. Grace's hands shook slightly. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them again, something had shifted in him completely. Not anger yet. Something colder, more controlled. He looked at Veronica and spoke quietly. "You don't make decisions about my mother." A pause. Then, "Not in my house." Veronica tilted her head slightly. "Ethan," but he raised his hand slightly. Not aggressively. Just enough. Enough to stop her. And for the first time since he walked in, the room didn't feel like it belonged to anyone else. It felt like it was waiting for him to decide what it would become next. And in that silence, Grace finally realized something. Ethan hadn't even begun to get angry yet. Ethan didn't move for a few seconds. Not toward Veronica, not toward Grace. He just stood there in the middle of the marble floor like the house itself had stopped responding to anyone else's authority. Outside, the rain kept falling against the tall glass windows. Ants. Inside, everything felt suspended. Then he spoke. "Mom," he said quietly, without taking his eyes off Veronica. "Did she touch you?" Grace hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Ethan noticed. His jaw tightened slightly. Veronica stepped in immediately, trying to regain control of the moment. "This is being taken out of context," she said smoothly. "I asked her to consider relocating. That's all." "No one is forcing." "Don't," Ethan interrupted. Just one word. Not loud, but final enough that Veronica stopped speaking mid-sentence. A silence followed. Ethan finally turned toward Grace, and when he saw her properly again, really saw her, something in his expression shifted in a way that was almost painful to witness. Not rage yet, something deeper, like disappointment that had finally found a place to land. "Mom?" he said again, softer now. "Tell me exactly what she said." Grace swallowed. Her voice came slower now, careful, like she was afraid of making it worse. "She said I don't belong here anymore," Grace replied, "that I've become a reminder of things you've already moved past." Ethan's eyes flicked slightly, just once. That was the first crack. Veronica noticed it, and she tried to step into it. "You've built an empire, Ethan," she said gently. "You can't afford emotional distractions. People will use her presence to question your image, your credibility." Ants. Ethan turned his head slowly and looked at her, properly, fully. Veronica stopped talking again. This time not because he interrupted her, but because she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Distance. Cold separation. Like she was no longer standing next to him, but across from him. "You think my mother is a distraction?" he asked quietly. Veronica exhaled softly. "I think perception matters," she said. "And I think I'm protecting you from the parts of your life that can be weaponized." Ethan nodded once, slowly, as if processing her words, not agreeing with them. Then he said something that made the room feel smaller. "My entire life started because of her." Grace's eyes softened immediately. Veronica didn't respond. Ethan took a step forward, then another. Now he was closer to Veronica than before, but still not aggressive. Controlled, measured. "But you walked into my house," he continued, "and decided she doesn't belong in it." Veronica held her ground. "I made a judgment call." Ethan's voice lowered. "About my mother?" "Yes." A beat. Ethan nodded again. Then he turned slightly toward Marcus. "You," he said. Marcus stiffened immediately. "Yes, sir? Did you touch her?" Marcus's face went pale. No, sir. I swear, I was told to escort her escort," Ethan repeated. The word sounded wrong in his mouth. Ants. Like it didn't belong in this situation. He looked back at Grace. "Mom, did he touch you?" Grace shook her head quickly. "No, he didn't." A small pause. Ethan's shoulders loosened slightly. Not relief, just confirmation. Then his eyes went back to Veronica. "You gave instructions," he said. Veronica didn't deny it. "I did." The honesty should have ended the conversation, but it didn't. Because Ethan wasn't reacting like a man trying to resolve a misunderstanding anymore. He was starting to understand intent. "And you expected him," Ethan said slowly, "to remove her from this house." Veronica's voice softened again. "I expected cooperation." That word again, cooperation. Ethan repeated it quietly, almost to himself. Then he asked, "Where exactly did you plan to send her?" Veronica hesitated for the first time. "Just a fraction longer than before. A smaller residence," she said finally. "Somewhere peaceful, she'd be cared for, comfortable." Grace gave a short, bitter laugh. "Comfortable?" she repeated. "Like I'm something you relocate and store away?" Veronica didn't look at her. She kept her focus on Ethan. "I'm trying to protect your future," she said again. "You're expanding globally. You're becoming a public figure. You don't need complications." Ethan exhaled slowly, then nodded. Once, twice, like he was connecting dots no one else in the room could see. "Ants, complications," he repeated. And then, very quietly, "You mean her?" Silence again. Veronica didn't answer, because she didn't need to. Ethan turned away for a moment, walked 2 steps toward the window. Rain streaked down the glass in uneven lines. Outside, the world looked distant, unimportant. Inside, everything was collapsing into something more personal. Grace watched him carefully. She knew that posture. She had seen it when he was younger. When something inside him had been pushed too far but hadn't broken yet, Veronica followed him with her eyes. "Careful now." Measured again. "You're reacting emotionally," she said softly. "That's understandable. But I need you to think clearly." Ethan turned back. And this time, his voice changed. Not louder, but sharper. "I am thinking clearly." A pause. Then he added, "For the first time since I walked into this house." That landed harder than anything else said so far. Veronica blinked once, slowly. Ethan walked back into the center of the room. Now everyone was watching him. Grace, Marcus, Veronica. He stopped, looked at all of them, then said, "My mother raised me in places where no one cared if I ate or slept." Grace's eyes lowered slightly, emotional but steady. "She worked 2 jobs so I wouldn't end up like the people everyone expected me to become." His voice remained controlled, but heavier now. "Ants. And you, he said, looking directly at Veronica, walk into this house and decide she's replaceable. Veronica opened her mouth slightly, but nothing came out immediately. Ethan raised a hand slightly, not to silence her this time, but to continue. I want you to understand something, he said quietly. Then he stepped closer, just enough that the distance between them felt intentional. This house, he said, is not built on perception. A pause. It's built on her. Silence. And in that silence, Grace finally looked up at him again, because she understood what was coming next. Ethan turned his head slightly toward Marcus. You're dismissed. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't even look relieved. He just left immediately, like he had been waiting for permission to disappear. Then Ethan turned back to Veronica, and what came next wasn't anger. Not yet. It was decision. I need you to leave this room, he said. Veronica froze slightly. Ethan. Now. The word didn't raise. It dropped. And for the first time, Veronica didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, looking at him, like she was realizing something she hadn't calculated for. That the man she thought she was protecting was no longer listening to her version of protection. And Grace, standing quietly behind them, finally understood something terrifying too. Ethan wasn't choosing between them emotionally. He was choosing based on something far more permanent, and whatever he decided next was going to change everything inside that house. Veronica didn't move at first, not because she didn't hear him, but because in her world, people didn't usually tell her now like that. She had built her entire place in Ethan's life on precision, carefully chosen words, carefully timed influence, carefully placed distance. And now, for the first time, none of it was working. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the glass like it was trying to get inside. Ethan stood still, not angry anymore, just decided. Ethan, Veronica said again, softer this time. You're not thinking about this clearly. You're letting emotions override. He interrupted her without raising his voice. I'm not emotional. To pause. I'm aware. That word changed something in the room again. Aware didn't sound like anger. It sounded like certainty. Grace stood behind him, silent now, watching the man she raised as a child become something the world had tried to shape but never fully controlled. Veronica took a slow step forward. Everything I've done, she said carefully, has been for your stability, for your reputation. You think people at your level can afford unpredictability? Like she glanced briefly toward Grace. Like this? That was the mistake. Not the first one, but the one that finally closed something inside Ethan. He turned his head slowly toward Veronica, and this time his voice was quieter than before. That woman, he said, is the reason I exist in any room that respects me? Silence. Even the air felt heavier now. Veronica's expression tightened slightly. I understand gratitude, she replied. But business doesn't run on sentiment. Ethan nodded once, almost like he accepted that truth. Then he said, You're right. Veronica blinked. That wasn't what she expected. He continued. Business doesn't run on sentiment. Pause. But my life does. Grace's hand lifted slightly to her chest without realizing it. Veronica looked at him carefully now, trying to find the leverage again, trying to find the version of Ethan that would still listen. You're making a mistake, she said. If you choose her over structure, over stability. Ethan stepped forward slightly. Not aggressive, but final. I'm not choosing between two things, he said. A pause. I'm correcting one. That sentence hit harder than anything else before it. Veronica went quiet. For the first time, she didn't immediately respond, because she understood something now. Not everything, but enough. Ethan turned slightly toward Grace, and his voice changed again, softened. Mom, did she ever threaten you? Grace hesitated, then shook her head slowly. No, she said. Not like that. Ethan exhaled, a controlled breath. Then he looked back at Veronica. You didn't need to threaten her, he said quietly. You just needed to decide she didn't matter. Veronica held her ground. I was trying to protect you. Ethan nodded. One last time, he said. Leave this room. A long silence followed. This time, Veronica looked at him differently. Not as a partner, not as a husband, but as someone she might be losing control over entirely. Still, she tried one last time. If I walk out, she said slowly, you're going to make a decision you can't undo. Ethan didn't hesitate. I already did. That was it. No raise in tone. No drama. Just finality. For a moment, Veronica stood still. Then she slowly placed her glass on the nearby counter. carefully, deliberately, like she was trying to preserve dignity in a moment that no longer offered it. She looked at Grace once, then back at Ethan. "I hope you don't regret letting emotion shape your judgment," she said softly. Ethan replied without hesitation. "I don't regret choosing truth over comfort." That was the last exchange. Veronica walked past them. The sound of her heels clicking against the marble felt louder than before, not because she was powerful, but because she was no longer in control of the room she was walking through. When she reached the door, she paused for half a second, not to look back fully, just enough to say, "This isn't finished." Then she left. The door closed behind her with a deep, echoing sound, and suddenly the house felt different again. But this time, not wrong, just empty. Silence settled in. Grace stood still for a moment, as if waiting for reality to catch up. Then her shoulders dropped slightly. Ethan turned toward her immediately. The shift in him was instant. The hardness softened. The distance disappeared. He stepped closer. "Mom," he said quietly. Grace let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "I'm fine." Her voice cracked slightly. And that was enough. Ethan reached out and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "You are not leaving this house," he said firmly. Grace looked up at him. "But she said I don't care what she said," Ethan replied. A pause, then softer. "You're not a guest. You're not a problem. You're not something to be moved." His voice tightened slightly. "You're my mother." That sentence broke something in Grace. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly, like something finally allowed to fall after holding itself together for too long. She nodded once, slowly. Ethan looked toward the hallway where Veronica had disappeared, then back at Grace, and said something that made the air feel heavy again in a different way. "I think I just let someone into this house," he said quietly, "who never understood what it was built on." Grace frowned slightly. "Ethan," but he didn't finish the thought. Instead, he walked toward the window again. The rain outside hadn't stopped. If anything, it felt heavier now, like it had been waiting for this moment to arrive. Behind him, Grace spoke softly. "What happens now?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He just watched the driveway, the empty space where a car had left moments ago, and finally he said, "Now I find out how far this was planned." A long silence followed, because deep down, something inside him already knew this wasn't just a disagreement. It was the beginning of something much bigger, and whoever Veronica really was in his life was only the first layer of a truth he hadn't seen coming. The house stayed quiet, but it didn't feel safe anymore. Not because of what had happened, but because of what was still coming. And Ethan Cole, standing in the middle of it all, finally realized this wasn't over. It had just begun.